Vincent Romano walked through Newark Liberty International Airport with the confidence of someone who had done this countless times before. His tailored navy suit blended seamlessly with the sea of business travelers rushing toward their gates, briefcases in hand and eyes glued to smartphones. At his side, a medium-sized German shepherd mix named Rocky trotted calmly, wearing a red service dog vest that granted them both a smoother passage through the terminal. Vincent had learned long ago that visibility meant vulnerability. The Romano family controlled interests in construction, waste management, and several legitimate businesses across New Jersey, but those operations required discretion. His father had taught him that the most successful operators were the ones nobody noticed, the ones who looked like accountants rather than criminals. Rocky had been a gift from his daughter 3 years earlier, and the dog had become his most constant companion, more loyal than any associate he had ever employed. The TSA checkpoint loomed ahead, and Vincent felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He carried nothing incriminating, of course. His laptop contained only spreadsheets for his construction company, his phone was a burner he would discard within the week, and his carry-on held exactly what any businessman would pack for a 3-day trip to Chicago. Still, airports made him nervous. Too many cameras, too many federal agents, too many opportunities for something to go wrong. Rocky sensed his tension and looked up, brown eyes questioning. Vincent reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, a gesture that calmed them both. They joined the pre-check line, moving efficiently through the metal detector while Rocky walked beside him. The TSA officer barely glanced at Vincent's identification before waving them through. They were collecting Vincent's laptop from the conveyor belt when Rocky suddenly froze. His ears perked forward, his body went rigid, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. Vincent followed the dog's fixed gaze to a large black suitcase sitting alone near Gate 47, about 30 yards away. The bag was expensive, probably Toomey or Samsonite, with no visible tags or identifying marks. Vincent tugged gently on Rocky's leash, trying to redirect his attention, but the dog refused to move. Rocky's growl intensified, transforming into sharp, aggressive barking that echoed through the terminal. Heads turned. Travelers stopped mid-stride. 2 TSA officers immediately altered their path, walking briskly toward the commotion. One officer, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, approached Vincent. Her nameplate read, Martinez. Her expression was professional but wary, and her hand rested near the radio clipped to her belt. Vincent recognized the posture. She was assessing threat levels, calculating responses, preparing for multiple scenarios simultaneously. Rocky continued barking, straining against his leash with unprecedented intensity. Vincent had never seen him behave this way. The dog was trained, disciplined, accustomed to crowds and chaos. But something about that suitcase had triggered an instinct Vincent couldn't override. Officer Martinez spoke into her radio, her eyes never leaving Rocky and the suitcase. Within 90 seconds, 4 additional security personnel arrived, along with 2 Port Authority police officers whose hands hovered near their holstered weapons. The gate area was quickly cordoned off with yellow tape, and passengers were redirected to alternative routes. Vincent's mind raced through his options. Walking away would look suspicious. Staying put meant involvement in whatever was about to unfold. He chose to remain calm, adopting the demeanor of a confused traveler whose service dog had inexplicably malfunctioned. It was a role he could play convincingly. A K-9 unit appeared, led by Officer James Brennan, whose German shepherd, Duke, was trained specifically for explosives detection. Duke approached the suitcase methodically, sniffing in concentric circles before sitting abruptly beside it, the universal signal for a positive hit. The terminal's energy shifted immediately. What had been routine security theater became a potential crisis. Officer Martinez turned to Vincent. Her tone was polite but firm. She asked him to step aside for questioning. Standard procedure when a civilian's animal triggers a security response. Vincent complied, keeping Rocky close and maintaining his carefully constructed facade of cooperative bewilderment. The bomb squad arrived wearing protective gear, their presence transforming the scene into something from a news broadcast. Passengers were evacuated from the entire concourse. Flights were delayed. The PA system crackled with announcements about unexpected security protocols. Vincent watched from behind a glass partition as 3 technicians approached the suitcase with portable X-ray equipment. Rocky had finally stopped barking, but his focus never wavered from that bag. Vincent felt a strange kinship with his dog in that moment. They were both creatures of instinct, both trained to detect threats, both navigating a world where danger often wore a mundane disguise. The lead technician examined the X-ray monitor, then spoke urgently into his radio. His body language communicated alarm even from a distance. Within minutes, FBI agents arrived, their dark suits and earpieces marking them as federal rather than local law enforcement. Vincent's internal alarm system activated. FBI involvement meant this was bigger than a forgotten bag or a hoax device. Special Agent Sarah Chen, a woman in her early 40s with sharp features and sharper eyes, took command of the scene. She conferred briefly with the bomb squad leader, then made a decision. The suitcase would be opened on site rather than detonated or removed. The X-ray had revealed no explosives, no wires, no triggering mechanisms, but something inside had set off both dogs and piqued federal interest. Vincent watched as 2 technicians carefully unzipped the suitcase, their movements precise and cautious. They lifted the lid, and even from his distant vantage point, Vincent could see their reaction. Shock, confusion, and then immediate radio communication with Agent Chen. Rocky whimpered softly, as if understanding that his work was done. Vincent's hand found the dog's head again, stroking the familiar fur, while his mind catalogued every detail of the scene before him. Years of criminal enterprise had taught him to observe, to remember, to anticipate consequences before they materialized. Agent Chen approached the suitcase, looked inside, and her expression transformed from professional detachment to genuine astonishment. She pulled out her phone, made a call, and within seconds was issuing rapid-fire instructions to the assembled officers. The suitcase was photographed from multiple angles. Evidence bags appeared. The entire gate area was declared a federal crime scene. Officer Martinez returned to Vincent, and this time her questions were more pointed. How long had he owned Rocky? Had the dog ever reacted this way before? What was Vincent's destination? What was his occupation? Vincent answered each question with practiced precision, offering just enough truth to satisfy curiosity while revealing nothing substantial about his life or business. Through it all, he couldn't shake one question. What was in that suitcase that had provoked such a massive response? It wasn't explosives, it wasn't drugs, or the FBI wouldn't have opened it so casually. But whatever it contained had transformed a routine travel day into a federal investigation. And Vincent Romano, who had spent decades avoiding exactly this kind of attention, found himself at the center of something he didn't yet understand. Rocky sat quietly now, his mission accomplished, unaware that his instincts had just set in motion a chain of events that would shock an entire nation. Special Agent Sarah Chen had seen many things during her 15 years with the FBI's Newark field office, but the contents of the black suitcase defied her immediate comprehension. She stood over the open bag, flanked by 2 evidence technicians and Officer Brennan from the K-9 unit, all of them momentarily frozen by what lay before them. The suitcase was packed meticulously with bundles of documents, dozens of USB drives, and several smartphones still sealed in plastic packaging. But what had captured everyone's attention were the stacks of $100 bills, arranged in vacuum-sealed bags, each bundle labeled with dates, initials, and cryptic numerical codes. Chen's quick mental calculation suggested somewhere between $2 and $3 million in cash. One of the technicians, a young man named Marcus, carefully extracted a document from the top layer. It was a contract printed on law firm letterhead, detailing a real estate transaction in Atlantic City. The names involved meant nothing to Chen initially, but the amounts were staggering. A $50 million land purchase structured through shell companies registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Chen pulled on latex gloves and began examining the other documents. She found bank statements showing wire transfers between offshore accounts, photographs of men in business attire shaking hands outside what appeared to be a construction site, and handwritten ledgers that looked like accounting records for some kind of large-scale operation. The more she saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. This was someone's insurance policy, a carefully compiled archive of evidence. Officer Brennan leaned in closer, his eyes scanning the visible papers. He recognized one name immediately: Carl Westin, a prominent New Jersey state senator who had recently announced his candidacy for governor. Westin's face appeared in several of the photographs, always alongside men Brennan didn't recognize, but whose body language suggested wealth and influence. Chen pulled out her phone and called her supervisor, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Robert Morrison. She spoke in measured tones, describing the discovery, while her team continued documenting everything. Morrison's response was immediate: secure everything, shut down the terminal if necessary, and bring the evidence directly to the field office. This had just become a priority investigation. Meanwhile, Vincent Romano remained in the makeshift interview area, answering Officer Martinez's questions with growing impatience that he had to carefully mask. Rocky lay at his feet, calm now, occasionally looking up at his owner as if checking for cues. Vincent had caught glimpses of the activity around the suitcase, enough to understand that whatever was inside had elevated the situation beyond routine security. Martinez asked Vincent if he had noticed anyone suspicious near the bag before Rocky reacted. Vincent shook his head, explaining that he had been focused on getting through security and to his gate. It was true enough. He genuinely had no idea whose bag it was or why Rocky had reacted so strongly. What troubled Vincent was the timing. He traveled frequently, always with Rocky, always through this same terminal, and he had never encountered anything like this. Coincidence was a concept Vincent didn't trust. In his world, coincidences were usually planned events disguised as accidents. Someone had left that bag there deliberately, in a high-traffic area where it would eventually attract attention. Back at the suitcase, Chen had found something else: a leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten notes. The handwriting was precise, almost obsessive, detailing meetings, agreements, and transactions spanning 5 years. Names appeared repeatedly: Westin, obviously, but also Michael Torrance, a real estate developer, James Liu, who owned a construction company, and Anthony Russo, whose name made Chen pause. Anthony Russo was a known associate of organized crime families in New Jersey, specifically the Romano family. He had been investigated multiple times, but never charged, protected by layers of legitimate business ventures and expensive attorneys. His appearance in these documents suggested a connection between political figures, business interests, and organized crime, exactly the kind of convergence that triggered major federal investigations. Chen photographed several pages of the notebook, then called Morrison back. She read him some of the entries, and she could hear the tension in his voice when he responded. This was going to require resources, coordination with other agencies, and extreme discretion. If word leaked before they understood the full scope, people would disappear, evidence would vanish, and the case would collapse. The terminal remained in partial lockdown, with hundreds of frustrated travelers rerouted and dozens of flights delayed. News crews had begun arriving outside, filming the scene and interviewing passengers who claimed to have witnessed the security incident. Social media was already churning with speculation: bomb threat, terrorist suspect, chemical hazard. No one yet knew about the documents or the money. Vincent's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. A text from his attorney, Richard Bloom, asking if he had seen the news about Newark Airport. Vincent didn't respond. He needed to understand what was happening before he communicated with anyone. Agent Chen finally walked over to where Vincent was being held. She introduced herself, her tone professional but probing. She wanted to know more about Rocky's training, about whether Vincent had any connection to the gate area, about his travel patterns. Vincent recognized an investigator building a profile, looking for inconsistencies or connections. He explained that Rocky was a rescue dog he had adopted 3 years ago, that the dog had shown aptitude for detection work during training, and that the service dog vest allowed them to travel together easily. All true. He described his construction company, provided business cards, and offered to show her his flight itinerary. Also all true, or at least true enough to withstand basic scrutiny. Chen listened, taking notes, her expression revealing nothing. She asked if Vincent would be willing to provide a formal statement at the FBI field office. It was phrased as a request, but Vincent understood it was really a test. Refusal would suggest something to hide. Agreement would mean hours of questioning, but might also provide information about what was really happening. Vincent agreed, maintaining his cooperative facade. He asked about his flight, and Chen informed him that all departures from this terminal were suspended indefinitely. She could arrange alternative transportation to his hotel if needed, but first, she needed that statement. As they prepared to leave, Vincent caught a final glimpse of the suitcase, now surrounded by evidence markers and being photographed from every angle. The money was clearly visible, stacked in neat bundles, and even from a distance, Vincent could tell it was serious cash. He had handled enough money in his career to estimate amounts by sight, and this looked like millions. Rocky walked beside him as they followed Agent Chen toward the exit. The dog seemed relaxed now, his earlier agitation completely gone. Vincent wondered what exactly the dog had smelled that triggered such a reaction. It wasn't explosives, clearly. Perhaps it was something else, something trained detection dogs weren't usually looking for, but that Rocky, with his particular history, had learned to recognize. The FBI field office was a 20-minute drive from the airport. Chen drove a standard black SUV, professional and anonymous, exactly what Vincent expected. She made small talk during the drive, asking about his daughter, about his business, casual questions designed to lower defenses and encourage unguarded responses. Vincent answered politely, offering just enough personal detail to seem genuine while revealing nothing substantial. At the field office, Vincent was escorted to an interview room. Standard setup, cameras in corners, table bolted to the floor, chairs that were deliberately uncomfortable. Chen brought him water and assured him this was voluntary, that he was free to leave at any time. All the standard language that meant he was absolutely not free to leave without raising suspicions. The interview lasted 2 hours. Chen asked the same questions multiple ways, probing for inconsistencies, testing memory, looking for reactions. Vincent had been through law enforcement interviews before, though never federal, never FBI. He knew the techniques, understood the psychology, and maintained his story with unwavering consistency. What he learned during those 2 hours, through careful attention to Chen's questions and the topics she avoided, was that the suitcase contained far more than money. The FBI was interested in political corruption, in business dealings, in connections between people Vincent knew professionally and personally. This wasn't about drugs or weapons. This was about power, money, and the infrastructure that connected them. When Chen finally thanked him for his cooperation and offered to have an agent drive him to his hotel, Vincent knew two things with certainty. First, the FBI would be investigating him now, looking into his business, his associates, his family. Second, whatever was in that suitcase was going to explode into something much bigger than an airport security incident. Rocky slept in the back seat during the drive to the hotel, exhausted from the day's excitement. Vincent stared out the window at the familiar New Jersey landscape, his mind racing through implications and calculating responses. Somewhere out there, someone was missing a very important suitcase, and they were about to discover that their carefully constructed world was beginning to collapse. By Monday morning, the contents of the suitcase had reached the desks of three separate FBI divisions: public corruption, organized crime, and financial crimes. Assistant Special Agent in charge Robert Morrison convened a task force meeting at 8 a.m., pulling together agents from each unit along with representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Special Agent Sarah Chen presented her preliminary findings on a large screen, photographs of documents and evidence laid out in chronological order. The room full of seasoned investigators fell silent as they absorbed the scope of what had been discovered. The money totaled exactly $2, $7 million in sequential $100 bills, suggesting a single source rather than accumulated funds. More significantly, the bills' serial numbers were being traced through Treasury Department databases to determine their origin. Early results indicated they had been withdrawn from 3 different banks in northern New Jersey over a 6-month period, always in amounts just below the $10, Undrada's zero reporting threshold. The documents painted a picture of systematic corruption involving state contracts, zoning approvals, and real estate development. Senator Carl Westin appeared in nearly 40% of the transactions, either directly or through associates. His construction projects in Atlantic City had received expedited permits, favorable tax treatment, and state infrastructure funding, all while making substantial campaign contributions to key decision-makers. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park, a prosecutor known for successfully trying complex white-collar cases, studied the evidence with intense focus. She pointed out that while the documents suggested corruption, they needed to establish chain of custody, verify authenticity, and identify who had compiled this archive and why. Without that context, any defense attorney would argue the evidence had been fabricated or obtained illegally. Agent Tom Reeves from the Organized Crime Unit raised the name that everyone was thinking about but hadn't yet addressed directly: Anthony Russo. Russo's construction company had been awarded multiple state contracts worth over $200 million in the past 3 years. His name appeared alongside Westin's in meetings, photograph metadata, and financial transactions. More troubling, Russo had documented connections to the Romano crime family through family relationships and business partnerships. Morrison asked Chen about Vincent Romano and the dog. Chen explained that Vincent's background check had revealed exactly what she expected: successful construction business owner, no criminal record, but family connections that raised questions. His father, deceased 5 years ago, had been investigated multiple times for racketeering, though never charged. His uncle, still living, had served 8 years for tax evasion, but Vincent himself appeared clean, at least on paper. His business generated legitimate revenue, paid taxes, employed union workers, and maintained proper licensing. If he was involved in organized crime, he had successfully insulated himself from any provable connection. The dog's reaction to the suitcase was likely coincidental, Chen concluded, though she recommended continued surveillance just to be thorough. Meanwhile, at a high-rise office building in Jersey City, Michael Torrance was having a very different kind of Monday morning. His personal attorney, Daniel Morse, sat across from him, delivering news that Torrance had hoped never to hear. Torrance was a real estate developer who had built a fortune turning struggling Atlantic City properties into profitable ventures. He had cultivated relationships with politicians, secured favorable terms with banks, and navigated the complex regulatory environment of New Jersey development with remarkable success. That success had required partnerships with people who operated in gray areas. People like Anthony Russo, people who could make problems disappear when conventional solutions proved insufficient. The suitcase discovered at Newark Airport belonged to him. More precisely, it had belonged to his chief financial officer, David Kessler, who had disappeared 3 days ago without explanation. Torrance had suspected Kessler might have taken documents, might be planning to cooperate with investigators, but he hadn't known the extent of what Kessler had compiled. Morse laid out the situation bluntly. The FBI had evidence of financial transactions, contracts, and agreements that Kessler had meticulously documented over 5 years. If those documents were authentic, and Morse had no reason to believe they weren't, they constituted a roadmap to multiple federal charges: bribery, money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy. Torrance's exposure was massive, potentially career-ending and life-altering. Torrance asked about Westin. Morse explained that the senator's office had already issued a statement claiming no knowledge of any impropriety, describing the transactions as legitimate business relationships subject to all required disclosures and ethics reviews. Standard political defense: deny everything, claim ignorance, suggest someone else must have made mistakes. What concerned Morse more was Russo. Unlike Westin, who would hide behind attorneys and political connections, Russo operated in a world where problems were sometimes solved through more direct means. If Russo believed Torrance had exposed him through careless record-keeping or inadequate security around Kessler, the consequences could extend beyond courtrooms and plea agreements. Torrance made a decision. He would cooperate with federal investigators, providing context and testimony in exchange for reduced charges and protection. Morse nodded. It was the smart play, probably the only play. But both men understood it would fundamentally alter Torrance's life. He would become a witness, an informant, someone who had betrayed powerful people to save himself. Back at the FBI field office, Chen received a call from Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. The serial numbers on the cash had been traced to withdrawals made by a shell company controlled by Torrance's development group. The pattern suggested deliberate structuring to avoid reporting requirements, a federal crime in itself. More interesting was where some of that cash had gone. Bank surveillance footage showed Kessler making deposits into safety deposit boxes at 3 different banks, always in amounts matching the documented payments in the suitcase ledgers. Kessler had been building a case from the inside, documenting everything, preparing for either leverage or escape. Chen assembled a team to locate Kessler. His credit cards hadn't been used in 4 days. His phone was off, and his apartment appeared undisturbed but empty. Either he was hiding very effectively, or something had happened to him. Chen's instinct, honed through years of investigations, suggested the latter. Vincent Romano spent Monday morning at his office in Passaic, reviewing construction schedules and meeting with project managers. His attorney, Richard Bloom, called twice asking about the airport incident. Vincent downplayed it. His dog had reacted to something. Security had responded. He had answered questions and been released. Nothing to worry about, just an inconvenient delay.